This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
I could perhaps go first.
Go.
Thanks. So for me, it simply means that, and I'll put it in a governance and leadership situation. So the smaller institutions and individuals basically mirroring what the leadership or the governance system is. That's in terms of practices, in terms of the systems, the culture, and this could go either positively or negatively. So for instance, if the systems are working, the ethical standards are set very well, that means that that system will work. That the smaller pot then is in the right direction. But if it's negative, and I would give a good example of our country where we are talking about a devolved system of government. We previously had the national, now we have the devolved. So we have ended up seeing devolving of corruption, for instance. We have seen devolving in terms of things to do with pending bills, bureaucracy. So that's basically it. So just ensuring that whoever is in leadership or the governance system is a good one, and then those people that are under it are able to behave appropriately.
Prof?
I think you have gone too academic. I thought professors should be more academic. For me, I just relate to my culture.
Yeah.
They say Mwanda nyodo nyathine, meaning that the mother, when the mother of an antelope can actually feed from the calf. So it means for us when we were born in poverty. I was born in Kibra, so my mother believed that if I break through in life, I can make a breakthrough for her. So sometimes that's why you see poor people tend to have more children, because they believe that if I have 11, like my mother had 11, she believed one of them will make a breakthrough, and that's where I'm going to feed from. So I look at it simply. I don't want to go talk about the corruption in the country because it's a crime scene.
Okay. Today I've also learned something new. Mwanda. I didn't know it's an antelope, but thanks, Prof.
Welcome.
Learn every day.
I'm telling you. All right. Okay, so let's look into this, shall we? Because it's quite some to get through. And like I said, Mama, they're here. The Kenya Human Rights Commission wants the government to scrap the Hustler Fund, warning that the initiative is financially unstable and fundamentally flawed. That's from the very beginning of this thing, there was a flaw. And usually when we look into construction, if you can see that at the foundation there was a problem, the walls will crack later, things will happen. What do the people come and say? You got to take this thing down. Otherwise, we're going to have a bigger problem later. That's what the Kenya Human Rights Commission is saying. The report that was filed on Monday says that essentially it was titled Failing the Hustlers. And you've argued that the fund, officially known as the Financial Inclusion Fund. Did you know that? By the way, the Hustler Fund is called the Financial Inclusion Fund. It has failed to uplift low-income Kenyans as promised. Instead, the rights group now accuses the program of lacking a well-defined framework to empower those at the economic bottom in a sustainable way. That's just the top layer of it. We're going to get into the details. Annette said that the fund, this financial... Okay, let's call it Hustler Fund for the purposes of this conversation. Financial Inclusion Fund essentially is flawed fundamentally from the beginning, going at a 71.5% loss. There is no business that can go at 71% loss and be viable. I don't think there's anything like that has ever happened in the world, anywhere. So what was the premise for looking into this? Also us remembering that this campaign that went into the election 2022 was an economic campaign. That putting money in the hands of Kenyans was the priority number one for the government, whatever government would come in. The opposition campaign at that time also ran on an economic campaign. So it was clear that Kenyans needed more money in their hands in order for them to operate. So it would appear that anything that was done after that would fuel this particular agenda. And it was upon that we assume that the Hustler Fund was born. In the beginning, there was even no operationalization metrics for the Hustler Fund. There was no framework, so the selection of the operation could not have been done. All of those things came into play. But Annette, from where you're coming from, it's a lot more than that. What's the a lot more?
Thanks. And I think it's important that we also look at the genesis because for this particular study, we looked at the Hustler Fund as a case study. But Hustler Fund cannot be looked at in isolation. So we have what we call financial inclusion. This is an initiative that has been taken up globally because basically it facilitates or allows for the improvement of the welfares of many citizens, both globally, in sub-Saharan Africa, in the East Africa, and now in Kenya. So for 20 years, Kenya has invested in financial inclusion initiatives. So it's not that Hustler Fund is the first one, you know. And we've had in funds such as the Uwezo Fund. We have the Women Enterprise Fund. We have the Youth Enterprise Development Fund. All those are financial inclusion funds. Then one would ask, why are we coming up with the Hustler Fund? And we remember the genesis of this was during the 2022 electioneering period, and the Kenya Kwanza side basically campaigned alongside that promise that if it comes into being, then they'll initiate, or rather they will establish the Hustler Fund. And basically what they were looking at that particular time is to ensure that 8 million Kenyans that were not able to access credit and improve their lives, invest in businesses, were those that were going to be captured. And immediately, the Kenya Kwanza administration came into being. We saw the launch of the Hustler Fund on the 30th of November, that's the year 2022. And in 3 weeks, 9.6 billion had been disbursed. But then there was a problem because there was no framework under which this fund was operating. And so there was a lobby group that went to court, basically just challenging the legality of the fund. And we saw that quickly regulations were put in place to basically support the management and the existence of this fund. And we'll speak about the regulations because there are gaps, and that's basically what is pointing us to say this fund really needs to be discontinued because of the bleeding of monies, and that's something that we can discuss as we proceed. So over time, the concern has been, and the reason as to why many and just the findings of this research point us to indicate that this fund should be decommissioned, is the fact that it's running at a loss. Right now, as we speak, about 68.3%. It's at 68.3% default rate. I mean, we are saying that out of 500 that is borrowed, 340 is lost. I mean, that's a substantive amount of money. How is it supposed to be running? So we can go into the details maybe as we proceed, but basically the genesis of this fund, the conceptualization of it, which is broadly political, is also one of the major reasons as to why the same is actually unsustainable.
Prof,
Yes.
just basing it from where she started, before you go into further details, look at also numbers. I just want to pick your mind on this. So the government comes up with this as a promise during the campaign period, and all this is about empowerment. So we want to empower these hustlers, quote unquote, create a fund. In establishing a fund, how then do you do it and ignore structures? How then do you go about it and ignore coming up with a foundation that then forms the basis under which you will structure the fund around, thinking through how you're going to lend, how you're going to recoup back your money, project numbers. I'm not a finance guy, but just looking at how I manage my own budget, those are things you think through. Now, this is a government with very, very smart, intelligent people sitting down, crafting this. Is this intentional? Or is this, in this case, just circumstantial, so that a group has to go to court and then the court has to address itself to, okay, look, this is how you need to manage this. In your opinion, is this intentional?
Yeah, first of all, let me tell the Kenya Human Rights Commission that they are doing a postmortem. Postmortem strategies are failure strategies, because you simply say, this patient came dead, so you're trying to find how they died. When Hustler Fund was launched, you say a lobby group. Yours truly is one who went to court. And I saw it before it was launched. and we were with you here when we had gone to court here with my other fellow lawyer. And I said the issue was the structure. And I would say that even if you want to discuss Hustler Fund in isolation, you cannot discuss it without looking at how did William Ruto begin ruling the country as Kenya Kwanza head of state. You can say that all signs were there. He has one way he did things. Without structure, he launched SHA. You see, what are the issues there? This was Ruto's maiden product. In fact, that's why he was sworn into office on 13th of September, and he launched it on 30th of September in Norfolk, with all banks surrounding him. KCB was there, sharing them with governance. I was completely flabbergasted. I was heartbroken.
Why?
I'm a governance expert. I'm a banker. I know how this works. First of all, did Kenya government ever put money on Hustler Fund? No. He brought these banks and told them, issue this money, it will come back.
Did he? Is that what
you
the
tell
metrics
me,
was?
Go to the consolidated fund and tell me how much money left consolidated fund and actually went. Who are the banks disbursing this money? Those questions must be asked, isn't it? You are told that if you took 500 shillings and you repaid, you also got money for NSSF, isn't it? NHIF. Those ones were there, isn't it? I ask people, do you know your NSSF number? You know, how can someone give you money telling you that the money will go to NSSF and you have no NSSF number? And reports were being done on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on TikTok. There was no governance. I went to court and said there is no board in office. The appointment of board violated the Public Finance Act. So everything was wrong. And you could see when he launched SHA, the same thing. Help, the issue of mean testing, bands, band 1, band 2, there was no even way to come out with those things. You go again to how the thing was done, the fertilizer was issued, the fake fertilizer. You go to everything, affordable housing, how money was being collected, now I'm being told the house levy is being used for building a market. There was no structure to anything, if I can tell you. So the second thing I can also say, which I'm very unfortunate to say that, Hustler Fund cost me my job because as a professional, I was a professor in Strathmore by that time. I came and said that the bottom-up economic model has never worked anywhere. It is not working anywhere. It won't work here. And now you have seen it. From 2022, when I said it, it's not working. If it's working, tell me how the economy is doing. And what is happening here is that Kenyans, so far, don't want to listen to the voice of professionals. When you say something, they ask you, that's a Luo. Yes, he's supporting Raila, isn't it? This is hogwash. We want people who can be allowed. Why is the US where it is? Harvard professors can speak and they say, hey, that guy is an economist. He's spoken. I'm an economist. I'm a banker. I even helped to write for India, when I was working with the Reserve Bank of India, the route to financial inclusion. A book being used by India as we speak, isn't it? My Solomonic economics, which was right here being discussed, is being used in Rwanda, how to build a global financial center in Rwanda. When you speak, you're being seen as your tribe. No one sees the professional mind in you. Why do you educate people so highly? Kenyans are so highly qualified, but their literacy level has no correlation with GDP development because their head is not being used on productivity. You listen to some Kenyans who are very brilliant in government, they are now speaking propaganda. You hear someone who is so qualified, he has given his right to think. You know, you have two important rights. Right to life, most important. Second one is right to think. If you give up your right to think, you are very unfortunate. Because of what? A philosopher by the name René Descartes says, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Meaning when you stop thinking, you are not existing. How many people are thinking in Kenya? It was banned by people in governance. So we went to court and challenge this because of this professional voice. Let me end by saying the following. This is going to answer your question clearly. I'm an economist, so there are two different ways an economist can empower people, isn't it? There's what we call affirmative action, and the second is called structural economics. Affirmative action is identify one person and give them money. Like, you see what's happening with the video CDF. You pick somebody. The issue of this fund is given by MPs for education is called what?
CDF?
No, it's not CDF. The one used for paying school fees. Bursaries. You take money, somebody applies for a bursary, come to your office, you give an individual, isn't it? Those are affirmative action. You could see affirmative action in Hustler Fund. I want to give a single Kenyan money. I want to give a single student school fees, isn't it? Yet the government knows how many number of schools are in Kenya. Now they are pretending they don't know. Dennis, do you know how to know how many schools are in Kenya? Go to the National Examination Council. They set exams in all schools. They know which school, location, the code, and all details. Then the government gives you a spot. We are doing what's called, audit to know how many schools. What a joke, my brother. You are giving people money to give a report you can have in one office. You get me? So the affirmative action, for example, let me give one woman MCA, nominate somebody to become women rep. Those are affirmative action, isn't it? They don't go very far. The second call is called structural economist, isn't it? Instead of going to identify Otieno in Ugenya and giving them fertilizer, why don't you create a structure to subsidize, not give fertilizer, subsidize the entire farming so that everybody do not come to you begging. You understand? Secondly, let me just finish. You go also to the issue of SHA, isn't it? Instead of saying, I'll pay for X number of people, SHA or NHIF, just make healthcare free. Doctors are in hospital. There's equipment, there's medicine, get it done. So this government, Ruto is so easy to understand. He has one thinking. I want to reach out to somebody directly. Kibaki just said free primary education. There was nothing like, I want to give Otieno, I want to give Wangeshi, I want to give Sijunani. The structural system of not running these things, what they brought in Hustler Fund, I want to give a Kenyan money directly. Then without putting structures in place, it doesn't work. A country cannot work when you don't have systems in place.
And I think that's a good place to be in. And Nirima, now, here's a question where we have Hustler Fund already here. We've seen the mess that is in Hustler Fund. It is not the first time that it is being raised. Several others, professors have raised it. Members of parliament themselves have raised concerns about it. But here's a question where nothing is being done. Hustler Fund is still there. Public money is still being wasted, even in your proposals that you've given that it be disbanded altogether. How then do we follow up on that to ensure that your recommendations are actually implemented? Else, this will just be another document on the shelves gathering dust.
It's quite concerning, and as Prof has said, we live in a country where we can see that we are not in the right direction in terms of very many governance related issues, but unfortunately no action is taken, especially by the relevant authorities. And this has played out in many times, including even last year in the 2024 finance bill. I mean, Kenyans said, in 2023 rather, they said, we do not want, especially the punitive proposals to go through. That was defied, especially by people they have elected or delegated the power to do so in parliament, who went disregarded their views and went ahead to just pass it last year as well. And that's why we saw people pour to the streets, because they thought and believed that whoever they had delegated power to would not be able to take it up. It's the same. I mean, the Hustler Fund is just adding on to many other issues that have been raised. This particular one, we were keen as Kenya Human Rights Commission to not just launch a report that has really damning revelations and findings, but to push using different strategies to just ensure that whoever needs to hear and whoever needs to take action does so. And we know for sure Parliament has power, the National Assembly particularly. We have relevant committees there that we expect should be able to take action, and that's why we are having bilateral conversation, but also inviting them into this conversation and not really pushing them to do that which is not right. It's basically in the interest of Kenyans that they go sit down and look at these reports, take necessary action. And when we say this, the Auditor General herself has been before Parliament and raised these concerns, but unfortunately it ends there. So we are saying that different measures should be taken, including going to court to just stop the bleeding of money. This is a taxpayer's money, and it's disgruntling, especially for a Kenyan that wakes up every morning to go work and pay their share of taxes, only for it to end up being misused at the end of the day. So this is concerning, and all we are saying is that this is a tipping point where all stakeholders really need to go back to the drawing board and ask ourselves, where are we going wrong? Ensuring that Parliament is in the Parliament, the executive, the civil society organizations as well, because now we have the power. There's evidence here, that cannot be disregarded. And 2 days ago, when this was launched, we saw the cabinet secretary hold a press conference, much as they were disregarding maybe the tone of the report and all that. They agreed with the findings. So that basically means we need to go back to the drawing board and ask ourselves, what do we need to do? Action really needs to be taken at this particular point in time.
Let's take a break at this point. We'll come back and look at what then the Hustler Fund, the Kenya Human Rights Commission has essentially said it be scrapped completely. And let's take a break and come back and see then, when you say be scrapped completely, what exactly it is that we are talking about. Well, the folks at Loop are telling you that there have been...
Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Grow with Safaricom Business. Power your business with Safaricom's unmatched connectivity. Super fast, reliable internet with business fiber. Next level speed with 5G. Seamless speed with Safaricom 4G. Pocket-sized power connects up to 16 devices. Safaricom Business. Dial *485# to get connected.
I make my Tuesday count by reading the Financial Standard. It helps me make much better and smarter financial decisions.
Setting the standard every day of the week. The Standard, Kenya's bold newspaper.
Oh, ni mimi unaongelesha? Ni wewe unaongelesha ndugu. Mimi niko nafikiria ni kuimba unaimba.
Ni kuimba kweli naimba, lakini nakuuliza tena kazi iko waje?
Wewe ni nani na unabeba hapa kama nani wewe? Hii ni stage na si ya mtu. Toka hapa. Toka hapa. Toka hapa. Wewe achana. Ama utafanya nini?
You dears. My hostess.
Yeah, Jezebel. Kumbe unaitwa you dears?
Unaniaibisha mbele ya my family severally.
Several times.
550 only.
No, you have been a good person to me. Lazima nikuongeze ka kitu bana.
Uko shulling. Wewe lipa gari.
Unataka how much?
50,000. Unataka yote?
Haididi. Mnanipeleka madhara ndio mali yangu. Kule vile mnataka. Kuna mnadanganya to this for my own good.
Ndio ulimaliza maji kwa fridge. Ukarudisha kibuyu bila maji.
Uko serious? Unanipigia hizo madrama nikiwa job? Wewe anjalipa gari.
Unataka kulipa?
Unafaa nikuitie polisi wewe. Nonsense. Toka hapa.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
CS Oparanya talking about, yes, it's gone to loss, making a clarion call for people to actually pay back the money that they had taken. But the Kenya Human Rights Commission goes a little bit further and says the fundamental flaws, we're not even asking for a fixing of that. You're saying scrap the whole thing. Okay. Why?
Thanks. Two reasons mainly for us to push for that. One, as I indicated earlier, we have had existence of funds in this country. We have the Women Enterprise Development Fund that was established in 2007. We have the Youth Enterprise Fund as well. We have the Uwezo Fund that was established in 2013, but again, formally in 2014. So all these, when you look at them, they actually play a role. In terms of even repayment, Women Enterprise Fund, for instance, the repayment rate is at 92%. The Youth Enterprise at 78%. The one that is making a loss is the Uwezo Fund. And that one came into being to support the youth, the women, but also persons living with disability. So broadly, you are seeing that all the categories have already been touched on by these funds, and they're performing well. Of course, there are gaps. So basically, a recommendation is to strengthen those gaps, to strengthen those funds, to just ensure that they are able to perform optimally, because the whole idea of financial inclusion is about ensuring that you're empowering people. And we are speaking from a common understanding, just defining financial inclusion as the ability for individuals and also businesses to access useful and affordable financial products and services that really meet their needs, that are delivered in a responsible and sustainable manner.
Are you saying that the loans that have been afforded to people, no matter what, if 500 shillings, 1,000 shillings, have not been able to make any dent in a sustainable future?
Absolutely, because again, when you look at the definition or the reason, the objective and the purpose of the Hustler Fund was to provide credit to these small income individuals in the country, which is a brilliant idea. I mean, if it's well thought out and done well. But the question is, it's now, we are 3 months shy of 3 years of the Hustler Fund. The question is, what are the outcomes? Are we seeing the reduction in poverty? Are we seeing economic growth that was promised? Are we seeing increased incomes and resilience? Absolutely no. And you see that alone points to the fact that the fund is not in the right direction, because at the end of the day, when you invest in financial inclusion initiatives, those are the outcomes that are expected. But if that is missing, the usage, the access and also the quality of the same is questionable, then it does not have business existing. So having said that, we are saying that we have funds that exist that are performing fairly well. There are gaps, that's obviously, but then how about those are strengthened? Then coming back to the Hustler Fund broadly, how is it performing? And you know, when you talk about performing, you're looking at very many aspects. You're looking at the enabling environment. So talking about the enabling environment, the research found that the laws that exist, for instance, the Hustler Fund exists under Legal Notice 213 of 2022. So again, as we indicated, this was hurriedly generated because Prof and team had gone to court challenging the legality of this fund. So for it to be able to continue, these regulations were then generated that have gaps. And one of the main or glaring gap that is within that regulation is how the fund is able to recover monies from the borrowers. And it's the reason as to why when we talk about a default rate of 68.8%, that's happening because there's no any other way. The only thing that the management of the fund does in case somebody defaults is just to freeze your account. It stops there, you know.
On your SIM card or whatever
it is. On your SIM card,
yeah.
It stops there. I mean, people can always change SIM cards and go to a different service provider once they default. And haven't Kenyans continued to exist despite defaulting from these repayment of these loans? So that's concerning. But broadly, it's the loss, especially on the taxpayer, that is quite concerning. And we are... the research established that the loss is at 71.5%. This can be calculated simply. So we are talking about a default rate of 68.3%. When it comes to borrowing, especially from the treasury bonds, it's averagely it was put at 8.2%. Then in terms of administration, operationalization of that fund broadly at 3%. And then we are talking about an interest rate of 8% annually. So you minus that, you get 71.5% loss. That is huge. It basically means that this fund is not able to sustain itself. And please, we need to note that when it comes to the funding of this fund, it's from the exchequer. And initially, when this was coined, we were told that it's a revolving fund, so it will be able to sustain itself.
So 50 billion.
That's not happening.
Okay. So 50 billion shillings is the amount of money that was earmarked for this fund in the first place.
Seed
Prof,
money.
Seed money. Prof might argue that 50 billion shillings actually never made its way anywhere. But for purposes of this, if we assume that 50 billion shillings was set apart in an account somewhere, released from the consolidated fund and gone to a special account that was then set up for the purposes of distributing this money when people applied, throughout the matrix and how that works. With the 71.5% loss that we're talking about, essentially we're saying that if 50 billion shillings that was earmarked for this, wherever it came from, that 35.5 billion shillings essentially is gone.
Yeah. You see, first of all, Annette, the acceptable, I'm a banker, acceptable NPL, non-performing loan, should be 5%. So if he's hitting that one, let me tell you, if Hustler Funds was being regulated by central bank, they could have scrapped it off. That's the truth. In fact, banks are almost required to report the provisions for non-performing loans. And once they hit a certain level, you'll be told comply or explain. If not, you go out. So there's even no need of going to court. Literally, if we are law-abiding, there is no need of going to court. And I think Kenya Human Rights Commission should come and join this case, because this case now is just being pushed over and over. The only thing we managed to get was to stop the taking of oath of office of the board members. Then they also find the way in which they have actually appointed some board members contrary even to the court order. So there's a lot of issues here. And if you talk about the issue of 35 billion shillings gone, it is not just now HELB. Look at after the president took over the control of HELB, now HELB is saying they have a deficit of 600 million shillings to be able to help university students to continue being in school. I've told you that the whole thing is based on bottom-up transformation agenda better. And bottom-up was never a structural economic thinking. It was more of affirmative action. I pick an individual who should swear allegiance to me for the rest of their life and love me for me, and then be for me. So there's no structure. Can you imagine when there was no management? There was no CEO. Who is the CEO of Hustler Fund? Now there's somebody chairing what they call MSMEs. They are chairing SMEs. So Hustler Fund is under SMEs, isn't it? Now, how is this person running if there's a CEO? Who is reporting these numbers? Where are you getting those numbers from? Who is running the operation? Should you give your money to Hustler Fund? Dennis, which office can you go now if you lose your money? If, for example, I saw in the Monday about political parties, they are required to have offices so that people can go to them. How can you run a bank where there is no office and there is no officer? You only see Twitter reports, you see Facebook reports, you see Instagram reports. The structure was really wrong. And I'm sorry if you think about members of parliament. This is a failed institution. I'm sorry, because the weakest link in governance in Kenya is parliament. Even for them to allow the Hustler Fund to go through, there were violations in the Public Finance Act. What have they not changed against Kenyans? For example, when people went for house levy, they went and passed a bill and act to go against the very thing. Parliament has even accepted unconstitutional bills that we have gone to court to challenge. They pass a budget unconstitutionally. The bill they pass were unconstitutional. You are looking for members of parliament. If you want to understand, and I do a lot of research, go to the committee in parliament on environment. No one has expertise on environment. You go to a committee on parliament on security, the chairperson will shoot one leg. You hear that? Are those people you are trying to go to? If parliament did their work, no one could have died in this country in bullets in agencies. No one could have died, my dear. It is the truth that we cannot rely on them.
So, Prof, my question is,
yes,
because you've said bottom-up has never worked anywhere,
yeah.
Yet this is how the current government came into power.
Yeah.
There were a lot of promises. The Hustler Fund was one of them, support Mama Mboga, Boda Boda, and the likes. Do you believe this initiative, this particular on the Hustler Fund, plus the other initiatives that have existed before Kenya Kwanza took over power, because they are similar initiatives.
Yeah.
Do you believe, as an economist, looking at all these initiatives, one, are they sustainable in the long run? That's one. Two, are we then building a dependency economy? Because we are saying, look, we have gotten to a point where We don't have any working structures whatsoever. And so because we won't work hard towards ensuring we have structures, let's create these revolving units or these funds. And therefore, what we're essentially then doing, we are creating a dependency. And it's becoming perennial every election cycle.
Yeah. First of all, the current economic structure globally, but even in Kenya, is based on three bad things. One is extremely exclusion. There's a lot of exclusion in the finance. That's why the financial inclusion, we cited that bill, was a very good idea. How do you include people? Secondly, is based on exploitation. That's why the Hustler Fund came in to avoid the exploitation that was being done by other lenders. So even if those lenders are still there, Annette, I'm sorry, they are still not doing what's called inclusion. Exploitation, someone charging 28% interest rate. And then lastly, it was actually based on a lot of inequality. Some people can access, others cannot. So that's what the economy really wants. Inclusion, lack of exploitation, and bringing the issue of removing exploitation and bringing inclusion. Now, if you want to look at this thing, how you need to address it, let's say you had 50 billion shillings at the head of state. What is the problem, Mama Mboga? You go to Meru, somebody has bananas that cannot reach Nairobi, isn't it? As a structural economist, give them route to market. Some people just want to market, don't want your money. Because if you give me 500 shillings, which business can I start with it anyway? Because they were supposed to use to start many. Look at how the bottom up was meant. I give you 500 shillings, you start a business, then you begin paying taxes. Now, since they did that, how many businesses have joined the tax-paying bracket? If there are more, why are you not collecting more? And if you are collecting more, why is the economy not growing to the speed it was growing? So the point is that it was wrong from day one. The intentions were written by an expert, isn't it? Professor Njuguna Ndungu is a very renowned economist. We worked with him. I know him. The writing was good. The implementer maybe wasn't honest. And I can say that if you look at the mindset of William Ruto is a unique president of Kenya. Last time he said, he gave himself a scorecard and saying that he's the brightest president in the history of Kenya. But the opposite is true. William Ruto has only worked in politics. And mark my word, the first president was a meter reader with Nairobi Water Company. That's Kenyatta, the senior. The second president, Moi, was a teacher in Kabartonjo. I can quote where he did. The third president was an economist and a lecturer, Mwai Kibaki. The fourth president was a banker at Kipande House with KCB, isn't it? Show me which company William Ruto worked in apart from politics or Youth for Kanu 92. None.
He said he's been a successful farmer, though.
No, bring your records. Which farm? What is the name of that farm? What's the turnover?
He says he was rearing chicken.
Bring the turnover of that chicken farm. All of us do farming of chicken, so we are foolish businessmen. We can't make it. What I'm trying to say is that. Look at what I'm trying to say. With that, he does not recognize what are structures. You work here in Spice FM. There are structures. Even to get me here, I cannot just walk in, isn't it? There's a structure. There's somebody reporting to. There's a framework. There's a board. There's management, isn't it? There are reporters. There are editors. There are people doing commercial. And those structures are there. Does he know them? If he knows them, maybe by reading. But does he know them by experiencing them? I've been a professor. I've received a warning letter somehow. Even you, maybe somewhere you got a warning letter or you got a disciplinary action. You know what it means to follow the law. Did you ever go through them? In Youth for Kanu 92, who was disciplining people there? So you leave Youth for Kanu 92, you become an MP, then you become a minister, then you become a deputy president, then you become president. Do you know structures? So for him, those structures don't exist. He's the one who exists. And this has been very consistent.
So, Annette, let's assume, with this report and what Prof is saying, let's assume Hustler Fund had structures. Would it still be working today? Would you give it a good scorecard if it had structures?
I mean, when we started the conversation, we said the whole idea is great because we would love to see that every Kenyan is meaningfully participating in the economic growth of the country. Everybody is enjoying that. So, and in our conclusion, flawed structures is one of the issues that we are raising, but also the issue of economically unsustainable, and also politically compromised. So structures are critical, but it will go beyond the structures to also look at the other the economic side of things and also the political side of things. But structures are quite critical. And when you talk about structures, we are looking at the laws that exist in place. So for instance, as I indicated, this fund is supported legally by the regulations. But the regulations have really glaring gaps. And one of them, we were talking about the recovery of those funds as well. But then when you still continue looking at the framework, and a good example would be in terms of even how the management of the same is happening, because that happens within a legal framework. So for example, if at all I'm to borrow today 10,000 shillings. So you borrow 10,000 shillings, you are told 5% of the same will be held. Okay, so 5%, so 70% of 5%, that's about 350, will go into long-term investment, the pension aspect of it that we were talking about. And then 30%, that's 150, will go into the short-term investment. Then at the end of the day, you are only able to get 9,500. So then the question is, how will I access, for instance, my long-term investment? As Prof was saying, how many people even know their NSSF number so that eventually they can come and get this money? That is not clear. And then when it came to management, again, the other thing that we were seeing is that monies will be received from the exchequer through KCB and Family Bank. Okay, and those are accounts managed by the Ministry of Cooperative and MSME. Then again, we have these telecommunication institutions, the Safaricom's, the Airtels, and the Telcoms that are facilitating the lending process. So you'll see that at the face value, the Hustler Fund, the interest rate seems very favorable and affordable. But then Safaricom will not give you this money free. It will come at a cost. So when you compound all this, it's not that it's as cheap as we may want to see it, but broadly all that is within a framework. So we are saying at the end of the day, flawed structures is quite a concern, but it will go beyond that to also look at the politics around it. And I think broadly it's the politics that is quite a problem, because from the findings and the respondents that we spoke to, they are saying we were promised. So this is basically a giveaway, and they do not see the reason as to why they are supposed to pay to repay, because again, they look at this as a reward for voting in the Kenya Kwanza administration. So they're basically being rewarded, and it's therefore unnecessary for them to pay these monies. So the politics around it, and when you look at over time, as time goes by, the revelations, especially by the documents or reports from the Office of the Auditor General as regards to mismanagement, misallocation, and monies that cannot be accounted for. So it's quite a worrying concern.
So, Prof, we look at the Hustler Fund as a political promise, right? But then again, let's talk about the government that's in place and Hustler Fund being there. And one would say this is a government position and perhaps a policy.
Yeah.
And with that then comes in how public fund is managed. Now talk about the PFM Act. And when we talk about this revolving fund, enter the Central Bank of Kenya and how they should regulate these funds and how it is working. But to realize that all these other institutions are silent, Parliament is silent, Central Bank is not speaking, the PFM Act is not being respected, and one looks at Hustler Fund as one big crime scene that does exist in the country. And it being the crime scene that it is, and there not being a political goodwill to handle this situation, which way, Kenya? Are we going to sit back and say, because it was a promise, let's just have it continue? Or how then do we ensure that this is stopped and that right is given to Kenyans?
Dennis, I can tell you they still hope this can work if there's goodwill. Whenever there's will, there's a way. And I want to say that if President William Ruto is listening to me, and if he can ever listen, there is somewhere in Mwai Kibaki's files, executive orders. As an economist who was advising the former president, we came up with a structure to execute anything that is a political promise. So it is called EMDA. Executive order. So you were supposed to write executive order to provide financial inclusion fund and stop there. You get me? That's the president. The second person to the president in execution is the minister, M. Ministerial policy. They write a ministerial policy on how to execute the order from the president. The third one is MD. D is departmental framework headed by the PS. So the PS writes an execution framework on how to implement the financial inclusion structure. Then A is agency. Now an agency, for example, in the road, we can talk about KENHA or KERA. Can now, or Teachers Commission in Education, now comes up with how exactly now to execute that. Then the president is uninvolved. It ceases to be a political thing. It starts being more of administration. And that's why the government is a going concern. But if the president weren't talking about it, then ODM answers them. Remember, as soon as they launched this thing, ODM called a press conference and said, don't pay. Am I wrong? You heard that? So like Annette says, it's become now political tussle by people declaring don't pay the government. Even me, the press statement I gave, I told Kenyans, if your government cannot comply to the law, why should you comply to pay? Because you see, I'm a banker, we're being told that when you are giving someone any loan, you want them to comply, you must comply first. Dennis, you can't go home and pass a law on how your family should run, and you're the one not complying. Actually, you're even passing a law that has not passed the compliance of the family. So for me, there's a structure for this. And I'm sorry to say that the problem we have in Kenya is that people don't want to follow what needs to be done. And I want to end by saying there are 3 government manuals. This government should not be run as guesswork. First, Constitution of Kenya 2010 is a manual. Tells you how you need to do things. Secondly, laws passed in Parliament. Those are manuals. And then the last 3 are policies made in ministries. When you have a manual how to do a phone, why do you guess? There have been funds before. Why do you want to invent the wheel when the one inventing is worse than the current one? Fire was invented in a long time ago. Why do you want to invent another fire which cannot burn meat? There's no need for it.
Indeed. And Annette, just to wrap things up, who then takes up the gauntlet in this case when these recommendations have been made?
And maybe before I go to that, just on a light note, before the broad-based government, there was a politician who indicated and told people, that's your money, you don't need to pay it. And so today, they are in position of power, and they're telling people, why don't you pay the Hustler Fund? Please pay. and you wonder, were they even rewarded or punished with these positions? Because, again, when you look at the way things are going, so that's just on a light note. But the responsibility lies with many, including the executive and the particular ministry in itself. And I think for me, even what we saw 2 days, like in less than an hour of the launch of the report, a press conference has been called, media has been kept for close to 5 hours because it's not clear what we even want to say. But we just want to react that a report has come out. That says a lot, that we are happy to defend even that which is not right. And that's quite concerning. As Prof has said, the political goodwill, if we had it, especially from the executive and from Parliament as well, things would be in the right direction. Indeed. And so as we close, and it's because of the lack of political goodwill that people are forced to go to court to compel relevant institutions and individuals to do that which is right, a case that should not be in our country.
Annette Nerima is the Kenya Human Rights Commission Program Manager for Inclusion and Political Justice. Professor Fred Ogola joins us as the economics and governance expert. Thank you for being here this morning. We'll see how it all unfolds. Asante sana at 9:01.
Thank you for having us.